Hello, everyone. This is the Broken Christian Man podcast. My name is Scott. The show is about what it's like to be a Christian in the real world. Topics that we may or may not agree on, but we still need to talk about them to find a path forward and to better understanding each other so that we can live more Christian lives. If you're interested in this kind of a show, tune out to the world, tune in to what we're talking about, and let's see if we can influence each other in a positive way.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I hope everybody's had a good week, and I just want to say a quick prayer. Lord, please bless the word today, and just be with us in these times as we're trying to understand you and your purpose for us. In Jesus' name we ask these things. Amen. So, been pondering a lot this week about, our purpose. We have a change in role of some sort, and you wonder, where do I fit into that? What's my purpose here? What am I really trying to do? And it could be anything in life. Any change that happens to you, I think that we immediately go, all right, what's my purpose here? How am I going to affect this? And sometimes it's daunting because you never really know how it's going to work out. Often as a Christian, want to go, well, God, where do you want me? Where are you leading me? And why does it suck right now? And a lot of times, sometimes we go down to, I'm trying, Lord, and it's just, I don't think it's going right. It doesn't feel like it's going right. Or you're met with a lot of obstacles. It's just like you're trying to get something done and everything is just going wrong, and it feels like it's not meant to be, or you're to turn around and just go the other way. I've said this several times, and I still stand by it, is that I believe that God is the great watchmaker. I mean, He is the great, artist as well. I mean, He molds us throughout our lives, but at the same time, God has this perfectly timed piece. And when you look at the world, for instance, there's two theories out there. There's the evolutionary theory, and then there's a creationist theory. Evolution believes that over millions and millions of years that, this and that and the other happened. There was the Big Bang, and that started the universe, and then eventually all these gases turned into planets, and so on and so forth. And I believe in that a little bit, because I do believe that the first thing in the Bible that talks about God and creation is that God spoke. And if you were to look at a being like God and try to think, if He spoke, what would that be like? The Hebrews often believed that if they heard God, they would die. They believed that God's voice was so incredible that their heads would explode. If you look at tabernacle tradition, a priest would go into the tent of meeting once a year, and what they would do is, where the Ark of the Covenant was, they would fill it with so much incense that you probably couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And then there's this veil, and this is still a veil that separates the inner place of God to the outer area. And this is also the same veil that would have split whenever Christ was crucified, symbolizing that God is now a part of us versus a separate entity. And the priests, they would get on their bellies. Like, you wonder why some people get out and become prostrate. They're in a kneeling position, and some people lay completely flat on their bellies. It's believed that you had to get as low as you could. And some of that tradition originates from the priests, how they would address God. They would take a rope and tie it around the priest that was selected to go into the tent of meeting. Can you imagine being that guy? Hey, all right, it's your turn this year to go and present incense and offerings to God. And so we don't know if you're going to make it out. So we're going to tie a rope around your waist, and you're going to crawl under this, crawl under the veil, and we hope you survive. But if not, we got a rope around your waist so we can pull you back out. And that's, I'm sure it was a great honor, and it's a little bit of a funny look at it, but that's essentially what they did. Is they tied a rope to the head priest, and he would crawl under the veil to pay homage to God and give a sacrifice, and then he would crawl back out. But it was the idea of crawling was that you had to get as low as you could, because there was no way. That was just the ultimate respect, is to be as low as you can before the great God. And so that's how that worked. So can you imagine, now you have God back in Genesis, and he speaks the world into existence. And scientists can see evidence of the Big Bang. It's what they say is that the universe is constantly expanding outward as if there was an explosion from a central source. That is the way that the science explains universal creation, is that there was just some kind of a happening, and we can still see remnants of that explosion to this day, according to a lot of NASA. So I find that's kind of interesting, but that also shows the awe, inspiration of God, and a creation or intelligent creation falls in line with that. Maybe the other things, we get a little different on. Christians believe the world is 4,000 years old. Science says otherwise. It's millions and millions of years old, and everybody has a counter debate to it. And I feel like it's just really what to do about nothing. It's so hard to try to sit there and decipher all that it's really not even worth discussing. The age of the world does not prove or disprove the existence of God. It's what we think. Our actions and what we see in the world is what proves that God exists. So, one thing to support intelligent design is if you've ever seen a woodpecker, we think that woodpeckers are pretty annoying. I do anyway. My mom hates them. And the thing that's interesting about this is if you take a look at a human and you just take your tongue, for instance, our tongues are attached to the back of our mouth, and we can stick them out, and it's responsible for taste and all this. A woodpecker's tongue actually wraps around its skull and out its mouth. Its tongue is so long that it's not big enough to fit in its beak, so therefore it goes around its skull and out its beak. And woodpeckers are looking for food. That's why they peck holes. They're trying to get termites and whatnot. Any kind of bugs. And that's the purpose of their tongue. But isn't it interesting that if that fit into a normal evolutionary perspective, then their tongue should be just like ours. But yet it goes around through the skull. Another thing that I find really interesting about intelligent design, there's several other examples of where it just doesn't quite fit into, where things fit more into an intelligent design versus evolutionary design. But that one just blew me away, and I had to tell you all about it. But the other thing that I think about is bees. I hate bees. I was stung very badly as a kid, so I don't like bees. But I read a little bit up on bees, and it's kind of interesting. We think of bees as making wax, beeswax, honey. We think of them doing all the things that they do, but bees are responsible for a portion of the pollination that happens on our planet. So if bees went extinct, which this actually came up in the news a couple of years back about this fear that the population of bees was lower that you would have plants that literally would go extinct. Not all, but some plants would go extinct if bees went extinct, because there would be no cross-pollination of a bee that's spreading it. And we don't think of things like that in our day-to-day lives. That seems like a pretty insignificant thing, but it shows one thing. It shows the difference between a woodpecker's tongue and a bee is that there is a purpose, and this purpose is beyond our comprehension sometimes. That everything plays together like gears in a clock. Our paths are interwoven, and things just seem to fall in place in its time. Things that shouldn't make sense tend to start to make sense. Things that don't seem like they could ever happen. It's very interesting whenever you start looking at the movement of God in that regard. And so, we talked a while back about, I did a 4-part series, and I think I even messed up one of those deals and double posted. So I do apologize. Made it an extra long discussion and a repost, but we talked about Job. And as I stated in that episode, Job most likely was not a real person. Most likely, the book of Job was written to show the purpose of God, the knowledge of God, the lack of understanding that we have of God, and also to show our own free will that we can have. But I want to talk about another figure in the Bible named Joseph. You can read about Joseph in Genesis, and if you want to get a good understanding of it, you can pretty well start reading about Joseph in right around Genesis 37. And there's quite a few chapters about Joseph, all the way to ending about 43. So there's quite a bit on Job. 37 to 43, that's quite a bit of writing in the Bible. And the thing is Joseph was a seer of sorts. He could interpret dreams. And there's a lot to cover, but Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers because they were jealous. Joseph was younger than his brothers, which is, to be favored by your father was kind of odd. To be the youngest, usually the firstborn, had the proverbial blessing and rights of the family. But Joseph was very favored by his father. His brothers were jealous. They sold him, and so much that his father favored him, he made him a coat that was very colorful. I'm sure you've heard it, Joseph in the Technicolor dream coat. It's been done over and over again. But the thing is, here it is. He's prominent. He's a dreamer. His brothers are jealous. They sell him into slavery. So they were going to kill him. So slavery was the better options. But can you imagine your brothers wanting to kill you? It just blows my mind. But yeah, so they sold him into slavery. He ends up in a prominent Egyptian household. He is very, very loyal to God. He refuses the temptation of the house owner's wife. She lies about him. He gets thrown into prison. Now, mind you, just in that, and I don't want to focus a whole lot on that because it's important, because in every role, Joseph prospered because God was with him. Whenever he was in the prominent person of, a prominent leader in Egypt, he was running everything for that person. He was a slave, that gained so much power in that household that he was basically, like the second in command. People went to him to ask what to be done. And, and that guy's wife takes a liking to him. He refuses to sleep with her because she's not his wife. He doesn't believe in premarital sex. She lies about him. She tells the head of the house what happened. He gets sent to jail. But then, even in jail, God is still with him, and he becomes a prominent person in the jail. He's in charge of everything under the head jailer. And then it comes to the point where he is his ability to interpret dreams comes to light. And the Pharaoh has some disturbing dreams that he doesn't understand. None of the mystics in Egypt understand. And somehow, I believe there was a cook or something like that, and Joseph interprets his dream. He asks for him to put in a good word, and the guy never says anything. He forgets about Job. But even still, despite that setback, Joseph becomes in favor of the Pharaoh and interprets his dreams. And then once again, he has found himself in prominence. So God is with him, and he's going through a lot of uncertain times. And I believe that we do the same. But if we live and look at Joseph's life in the Bible, it shows that when God is with us, everything has a purpose, even the bad stuff. If you think that you're going to be a Christian and everything's going to go great, it's not. Because the bad things in our life are what temper us and make us wiser. We learn some from the good stuff, but we learn the most from the trials that we have in our life. And if you follow this a little bit further, Joseph makes an interpretation of years of drought and famine, and he helps the Pharaoh prepare for it. And so in Egypt, they're instructed to store up the grain in the good years to get them through the bad years. And a drought does happen. So much that Israelites from the Promised Land leave the Promised Land and come to Egypt to get food. And it just so happens that Joseph's brothers, the ones that sold him into slavery, have to come. They don't recognize him. And whenever he does reveal himself as who he is, they're scared. And I would be too, wouldn't you? Hey, I'm going to sell you into slavery, make your life crap, separate you from your family. The brothers told the father that Joseph was killed. So the father's none the wiser and has mourned his son. And yet, Joseph forgives them and takes care of them. It's through our life, we're supposed to take our trials and our temptations, our tribulations, our everything in life, and give the grace that God gives us. And it is so hard. But that's what's expected of us as Christians. It's the example that we need to live by, because when God is with us, who can stand against us? Troubles may come and troubles may go, but it will work out for God's purpose, God's ultimate good through us. And I'll tell you something that's interesting, because the Bible, people are like, that's just a Bible story. It didn't happen. But if you go on the web and you look up, there's a Wikipedia, and it's called The Famine of Stela, S-T-E-L-A. You can look this up. There is a rock, and it inscribes all of this happening. It actually talks about the famine, talks about the dreams that the king had. But it doesn't really make mention of Joseph in this tale. But I find it interesting that you have an occurrence in the Bible and an occurrence that is documented in Egypt of this same occurrence. And there is a statue. I've been trying to find it. I've seen it on a National Geographic, but I have not been able to find anything of the web on the web about it. So maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I'll follow my own sword on that. I haven't been able to find it to give you a reference. But there is a Jehoshaphat, that there's a memorial statue to that inscribes somewhat of the same, that was the overseer of this undertaking in Egypt. And so I find that funny. But like I said, I seen it on National Geographic. It's been many years ago, and I've been trying to find it back, and I haven't had any luck. So maybe I'm misremembering that, or maybe it's just something that's interesting. There's a lot of crap out there too. So, maybe it was something to do with there was a show called The Naked Archaeologist for a while that I thought was interesting, and I just can't remember where I seen it. And I do apologize that I can't find that. But I want to say that I've seen something with a Jehoshaphat, which I find that similarity to Joseph very interesting. But, the thing is if we live in this example of Joseph, good and bad things happen to him, but as long as he tried to stay within God's laws and God's will, and that means obeying the things that we get taught. It's crappy to commit adultery, premarital sex. It's crappy to steal from your neighbor. It's crappy to not do good by people. It's crappy to deny God. All of these things, I believe they create roadblocks in our life, and it causes us to fail in a lot of ways. But as long as we worship God and keep God with us in our hearts, we're going to come out. It's going to work out. So much so that the Bible even tells us to not worry about tomorrow. Jesus did a Sermon on the Mount telling us not to worry. That even the birds are clothed and provided for, yet they do not store in storehouses. Now think about that. I'm tying this back to our friend, the woodpecker. He doesn't store up. He's got a cool looking tongue that goes all throughout his brain. But, sorry, a little bit of a joke. But bottom line is that this woodpecker was designed for his needs. And God will meet ours. Maybe not our wants, but he will meet our needs. It's just keeping on, putting one foot in front of the other. And we're in some scary times right now. There's a lot of apocalyptic talk out there about the end of the world, World War III. Do not worry. God will let us know what needs to be done. He'll give us the instincts to do what is needed, or we'll be raptured out. The Bible stops talking about the church after the fourth chapter of Revelations, because the church isn't here anymore. The church is the people of God. Next week, we're going to talk about a little bit of that, being what it is to be the people of God. But for now, keep yourself in check. Keep your eyes on God. If you're married and you're having problems, put God at the front of your marriage. And just see how things shake out. Because God's going to lead you. And if you give your life to Him, He is going to nurture it and take care of it, just as He takes care of the birds of the air. I love you all. I hope you have a great week. Keep the faith. Don't worry about everything that's going on out there, but be aware. Always be aware. Always be a watcher of the times. Don't put your head in the sand. I love you all. Have a good week.
Well, that's all we have for today. If you could, please like and subscribe to the podcast. And while you're there, please give us a rating. Also, please check us out on Instagram under Broken Christian Man, and also under Twitter under Broken_CM. Thank you.